There are just some things you don't ever really expect to see, like your mother-in-law in a good mood, or your mother-in-law admit when she's wrong, or your mother. I'll lay off the mother-in-laws. But there are just, especially in the college football world, there are just some things that you don't ever expect to be in a headline together, like the words Syracuse, lands, 5-star recruit, because it hasn't happened in a long time. But Calvin Russell, a wide receiver from the class of 2026, so next year's recruiting class, has committed to Syracuse, which is the latest in a really long line of commitments to the Orange compiled by head coach Fran Brown. They have 26 players committed to the class of 2026. They have another top 300 player overall from ESPN and Cameron Wilson. They have a bunch of 4-star wide receivers, a 3-star quarterback who originally was committed to North Carolina to play for Bill Belichick. And I think this is a really good thing for Syracuse and the ACC both, because for so long the ACC has been Clemson's to lose. And while that has undeniably been good for Clemson, they have dominated that conference for the better part of a decade and a half, working on 2 decades at this point. And that's been really great for them. But for the ACC to polish up its perception around college football, they're going to need to have more than just Clemson and the occasional Miami, Florida State, 10-win North Carolina, etc., to get back to being viewed as even close to on the same level as the Big Ten and the SEC. And I think part of that probably depends on the ACC survival, to tell you the truth, after the dollar figures were released that, hey, in the next couple of years, it's only going to cost Florida State, Miami, Clemson, Georgia Tech, Virginia, North Carolina, $75 million to get out of the ACC and join the Big Ten or SEC. So for Syracuse to be good at football is a good thing for the ACC. And obviously, compiling a bunch of 4- and 5-star recruits is going to be good for Syracuse. But I think there are 2 different reasons for why you see a headline like this. They're like, hey, a 5-star wide receiver, the biggest, baddest prospect to commit to Syracuse since 2000. We're talking a quarter century that this is the biggest player to commit to Syracuse. I think there are 2 reasons for this. One is that Fran Brown is a very, very, very good recruiter. If you go back into the annals of this podcast, and we're coming up on 400 episodes, by the way, which feels unreal to me. But when Syracuse hired Fran Brown, I thought, and I said, he's going to be a really good recruiter, because that doesn't fall off. He was a really good recruiter when he was an assistant at Georgia. You don't become the head coach and forget how to recruit. Now, it might be a little bit more challenging to talk kids into going to Syracuse than Georgia. But if you're good at it, you're good at it no matter where you are. So I thought that Fran Brown was going to get recruits to Syracuse, because that's just what he does. He builds relationships with guys who play football good and then convinces them to come play at his college/university. But I wondered if he would be in that similar vein of guys who have been great recruiters, but maybe not great head coaches. Guys who are fantastic at talking players into coming to play for them. You compile a lot of talent, and then you scratch your head and go, well, hell, I don't know why we didn't win 10 games, 11 games, 12 games. If he would be in that similar vein to, and some people argue this because he's got a national championship, but like Ed Orgeron, not a great head coach. Great recruiter, spectacular recruiter. Damn near every college in America wishes they had a recruiter like Coach O. Not a great head coach. Won a national championship, and that team is viewed as one of the best in college football history, and it wasn't because he was their head coach. And there's somewhat a long line of this, of guys that are good recruiters where haven't ever gotten over the hump, haven't gotten to where you might expect them to, with their recruiting abilities. Ron Zook at Florida and Illinois got some good players. Never really did a whole lot with those pretty good players. And I don't know. I think it's obviously too early to determine in Fran Brown's career whether or not after one season of whether they are, on the path to being potentially a team that you can go, oh, well, they got good players, but they underachieve every year, yada, yada, yada. I don't think we can make that determination after just one season of him leading that program. But in his one season leading that program, they won 10 games. And the games that they lost, 2 of them were by 1 score or less. I think the future is really, really bright at Syracuse. 1, because Fran Brown is really good at recruiting. And 2, let me backtrack this. There are a lot of programs who are neglecting the high school recruiting ranks and just focusing on the transfer portal. And I'm not here to make some big, large determination on whether or not that's the right move for any given school, whether that's the right strategy going forward, etc. But what I do know is that if a lot of schools focus their attention on the transfer portal, whether that's guys coming down or guys coming up, whether that's group of 5 schools saying we're going to take guys that are falling down from the Power 4, or Power 4 schools saying we're going to recruit the hell and get the best players in the group of 5 and bring them up. If that becomes the focus, that means there's less competition in the high school recruiting ranks, which means schools like Syracuse, who might not have been a conventional attractive pick to somebody that's a 4-star recruit or a 5-star recruit in the past, now kind of recognizes the lack of options. And that's not to say the high 4 stars and 5 stars, every college in America wants them, right? Like Texas, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Alabama are not turning away 5-star recruits because, well, there's a pretty good transfer from Memphis that's coming in. Like, that doesn't exist. But guys who are low 4 stars and high 3 stars, those tweeners, are you a 3-star on this service and 4-star on this service, whatever the case may be, they might now have a lack of options that they didn't have, that didn't exist 5 years ago, that didn't exist 10 years ago, where they would be sought after by blue blood programs. Well, now those blue blood programs are dead set on recruiting other Power 4 players and group of 5 players. And they're not as focused on scouting, determining, and frankly, caring about the development of high school seniors. Syracuse can get in that boat. They can get their foot in the door now where maybe they didn't have that ability before, which leads to you having 26 players committed to your program before August 1st for the next year's recruiting class that has a bunch of wide receivers in it, which now includes Calvin Russell, who is a fantastic prospect, where this doesn't necessarily happen in the past. So it's kind of a perfect storm for Syracuse right now, where you have a really good recruiter who has a ton of relationships in the South with programs who maybe aren't as completely interested in recruiting high school players like they once did. And he's got an ability to put a foot in the door and say, hey, in year number 1, we won 10 games. I am now interested in you as a high school player, where some other Power 4 programs might not be interested in you as a high school player. If you come here, we'll develop you. We'll turn you into a spectacular player. And if that turns you into a spectacular portal pickup from somebody else, so be it. I still get to benefit from having you around for a year or 2. It's a win-win-win. So in year 1.5 under Fran Brown, he has completely transformed that program and made them a viable player in the recruiting space, which deserves a ton of praise because Syracuse has had a long storied history as being a really good football program. And over the course of the last 20, 25 years or so, have fallen on some hard times. Dino Babers had some good teams at Syracuse, maybe not to the level that Syracuse fans would have wanted him to have, because I think there was some decently high expectations when he became the head coach. But for Fran Brown in year number 1 to win 10 games and now have a really good recruiting class before the transfer portal, before you start adding or considering what the transfer portal for next season might look like, etc., I think the future's really, really bright for the Orange. And I think that should be viewed favorably by the ACC and not so much as the teams who have been somewhat power brokers in that conference, the Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina, to a lesser extent, should be somewhat, I think, worried about what the future for Syracuse looks like. Now, I'm not saying that they're a national championship contender or anything like that. I think it still might be a couple of years before, even if you keep stacking recruiting classes similar to this one, that you could say, okay, Syracuse is a legitimate player here. I don't think they're that. But can they be a team that consistently finishes in the top 3-4 of the ACC, compete for conference championships, and compete for college football playoff spots? I think it's hard to argue anything other than that right now. And that should be really, really exciting for fans of the Orange. Want to know your thoughts. Do you think Syracuse can become a power player in the ACC under the tutelage of Fran Brown, or was year number 1 an aberration and things aren't going to continue to stay at that level? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below about the Syracuse Orange. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is or wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.